Is dyeing a scoured fleece rather than a yarn maybe just asking for trouble? Very high risk for felting, not getting the colors that you want, maybe? But I'm gonna be honest, the last few weeks have been really hard for me. My brain was a little bit scattered. I made a lot of mistakes during this process, but I also wouldn't have ended up with the beautiful rainbows of colors that I did if I didn't make a lot of the mistakes that I made. What are we even doing? We are attempting to use some natural dye on a portion of the remainder of my Ryland fleece so that I can make some lovely contrast bits in a shawl that I'm planning on weaving. I love tartans and plaids, so I want to kind of have a contrast color to weave up a shawl. I want it to be mostly the natural color with some contrast dyes, and we're using avocado. I have done some research and it's these beautiful shades of like dusty pink. I might have already given you a hint. I was planning on just one contrast color and I ended up with way more. So why don't we jump to my first dye attempt. I have quite a few natural dyeing books that I use as reference. I could tuck your ear off about this, but I'm going to boil it down to 3 things. There's 3 ways that you can influence the depth of color, the actual hue of your color, and the longevity of your color. The first one is mordanting. And mordant is what you can think of as kind of, it's like a bridge between your fiber and your color. So if you just dyed with a color, some of it would stick. Depending on what your dye material is, a good amount might even stick. But if you use a mordant, you create these opportunities for more dye to stick to your fiber. It becomes more color fast with light and with washing because it basically creates like a really strong bridge or bond between your fibers and your colors. So I decided to pre-mordant my fabrics or mordant my fabrics with alum. You have to pre-make the avocado dye though. You can't just throw in your peels and pits with your fiber and hope that that turns out. I have seen some people online do that, but it ends up with a really light color, and I was hoping for a super rich dark depth of color. I got completely off track too because I didn't tell you about the other 2 ways to influence the color and hue. Sorry, I am still very scatterbrained. The other 2 ways are how you prepare your dye material, what concentration you use, and the amount of time that you expose your fiber to that dye material. So you can get a range of intensity based on how you prepare your dye material. Oh, look at this. Do these heavenly clouds of wool just make you dream of sleeping in your yarn or roving stash? Then I think this week's sponsor, Birch, is the right one for you. I love Birch Living because they make mattresses with organic and natural materials, like organic cotton, organic wool, and 100% natural latex. It's honestly like sleeping in your wool stash. There are no polyurethane foams, so I don't have to worry about any harmful off-gassing. Plus, Birch mattresses are made without fiberglass, which many other brands use as a flame retardant. Birch's manufacturing facility is completely free from fiberglass products. It's all about top quality materials that you can trust. I personally chose the Birch Luxe Natural Mattress because I wanted a premium upgrade. I've had it for many months now, and it's been amazing for 2 big reasons. First, it's incredibly comfortable. I fall asleep quicker and sleep more soundly, and I do track my sleep stats. And second, it's environmentally friendly and uses organic wool instead of synthetic fillers. Since I'm working with natural fibers in my crafts, it feels great to be sleeping on natural fibers too. I loved it so much that I actually bought another one for my parents because it was just that comfortable. Another bonus is their 100-night sleep trial and a 25-year warranty, so you can really make sure it's a great fit for you. And best of all, they ship the mattress to your door free in the US. Mine arrived rolled in a box, and setup was super simple. You just unbox, unwrap, and watch it expand. It expands in no time to a soft, fluffy mattress you can't help but jump into, with no airing out needed. I could just go right to sleep on it. Since it's President's Day sale time, be sure to check out birchliving.com/engineeringknits to get 27% off your Birch mattress with code BIRCHPARTNER27. I've really enjoyed sleeping on my mattress for the past few months, and I'm sure that I will continue to do so. And I want to give a huge thank you to Birch for sponsoring today's video and making videos like this even possible. So now that we've talked about some comfortable wool, why don't we go back to my very own fluffy wool that I'm trying to make in a whole host of colors, hopefully pink too. So for the avocado peels and pits, I followed the method where they say to put the peels and pits very well cleaned, so they were like scrubbed clean, into water over a pot, and I boiled it for at least an hour on day 1, and then I let it sit overnight, and I boiled it again on day 2. I let that cool down, and then I added my wool. Again, I don't want big temperature shocks with my wool, and because my wool was kind of cool, I didn't want to put it into a warm bath. So I waited for those two to reach equal temperatures before introducing the wool to the dye pot. The first dye pot that I made, I actually, because I just didn't find the time to do the actual dyeing, I was expecting to do it the next day, but things happened. So I ended up boiling my avocados for like 3 or 4 days on the stove. I had like, it looked like red wine, like a really deep red wine on the stove. I also made like not the best choice. So the third way that you can influence how your natural dye turns out are called modifiers. And there's a ton of ways where you can modify your hues. One of them is acidic versus basic. With this particular dye stuff with avocados, the more basic, the redder and pinker and deeper that pink hue will be. And the more acidic, you'll turn it into like peach colors. I wanted more of that pink red hues, and so I decided to add some baking soda into the dye pot, which I really honestly shouldn't have done because basic solutions degrades the quality of the wool, which you'll see later I really struggled with. I still am going to use the fiber, and I think I made it so I can still use whatever I was able to salvage, but that was not, again, things have been really crazy lately, so I wasn't thinking particularly straight. It's okay, it would have been better as a modifier afterwards. So after I dyed my batch, you kind of just dip it into a basic solution so you don't allow it to soak in there, because what I did is I put the wool in with the avocados, pits, rinds, basic solution. I let it sit, come up to a boil, simmer, not a boil, you don't want to boil it because then it turns it brown, just below a boil. So simmering it, I simmered it for an hour and then I let it sit overnight, which, what was I thinking? Anyway, after doing that, I took a portion of that dyed stuff and I dipped it into an iron solution. Iron is another modifier, and there's another. Iron solutions are really easy to make if you have iron nails, especially if things are rusty. I actually have a very, very rusty flax hackle, and I have been meaning to remove the rust from that, so I just soak that in an acidic solution, and then when you dip the fiber that's been dyed with the avocado dye stuffs into that acidic solution, it is what is called a saddener. So it tends to make colors darker. You can get grays, almost blacks, but sometimes they'll still have a shimmer or hue of that plum pink in the background. It's not like purple, but you definitely still have those hints of what the original color might have been. And I very much liked the hue that I got from that and the depth of color that I got from that. But what you might have noticed is that when I took my fibers out from the original dye bath, the ones that I didn't use the iron modifier on, it's not really pink. And I was so shocked. After it dried, it turned into this golden color. It's a beautiful color, but it wasn't what I was hoping for. I was very, very confused by it. The other maybe not so great decision that I made, again, I'm going to keep on saying it, I wasn't, and I still am not thinking the most clearly, but I decided just to put the rinds and pits in there. Maybe the pits would have been okay, but the rinds just broke up over time, especially because I had been boiling them for like 3 days. And they got really nicely incorporated into all the fibers of my wool. That made it very hard to clean out afterwards. But I was scratching my head why my fibers turned out gold rather than pink, especially because I used a basic modifier. And guess what? I used an aluminum pot, which is not a good idea when you're dyeing because the aluminum pot tends to interact with a lot of your dyes. It's kind of close to the modifier, so my dye stuck more to the pot than it did my wool, and whatever was left that stuck to my wool was that golden color. Great! But I had a good amount of it, and then I decided to process it and work a little bit at picking it and carding it because I wanted to see what the results of that dye experiment was and to see if should I re-dye that bit Is it worth it to dye maybe more? I also realized just the vast quantity of wool that I had to process, not just for this fleece. I have at least three or four more fleeces to process. And I very much want to process them, but hand carding everything, I already struggle a little bit with fatigue and repetitive use injury in my hands and forearms. So I didn't really want to put all that strain on that. So I decided to get a drum carder to help speed up that process a little bit and take a little bit of that strain away from my body personally. But as a part of that process, the basic solution really did a number on the wool. I mean, surprise, right? Like that really is not a surprise. But I did manage to save more than half of it to use for being able to spin it into my final shawl, which I'm very happy about. Now, originally, when I was preparing this fleece to be turned into a shawl, I decided that I would dye about a third of it, and a third of it would be a contrast color, and 2/3 of it would be the original neutral color. Now I had a third of it, of which a little more than half has made it and is structurally sound enough to turn into a contrast color. And of that, most of it is a beautiful gold and some of it is a light gray. But I did lose a lot to my poor choices in turning it into a basic solution. So I decided, now that I also knew that the aluminum pot was the issue, that I would try to dye it one more time, this time with a stainless steel pot. And not to worry, all these pots are dedicated dye pots only. So no matter what, they will not be used to make food. It's important to remember the safety of everything. So, and the other thing that's really important to remember is when you're working with wool, especially raw fleeces and things, and around sharp things like carders, and I had a hackle around, be up to date on your tetanus. That's an important reminder. But with the right equipment, I tried to re-dye it one more time. This time I didn't have as many avocado peels and pits, which I'm sad about because I'm very curious about the depth of color I could have reached. But with the avocado peels and pits that I did have, we hadn't been collecting them as long, I made another dye bath. So first I just boiled the peels and pits, very clean peels and pits, for an hour. I let that solution sit for the day. First thing in the morning, I boiled it for another like 2 hours. I let that cool down. I did not pre-mordant my fibers because the one person who I saw online that had the exact hue that I was going for did not, and said that the tannins in the pits of the avocado was enough of a mordant to have the color stick very nicely. So again, I wonder what the alum mordant might have done to the outcome of these tests and experiments and dye explorations. But I then put the wool fiber in there and I let that soak for about an hour and simmer. Not just soak, but I brought it up very slowly to a simmer, and it simmered for an hour, and then it sat overnight in the dye bath. I didn't use unpicked fleece for this. I had tested out my carder with a section of fleece that I had picked and carded. So I put, I guess it's roving, or it's a bat of fiber at that point, which, again, very dangerous. It would have it was actually quite close to turning into just a felted mat of material rather than something that I could spin. But I also took a portion of that and I dunked that into the iron bath. That was so cool. That water turned, like, I felt like a witch, honestly, at a cauldron. It was magical how deep that color turned. And that version of it, like, I think just the depth and richness of color I was able to get was really cool to see when I changed it with the iron and I modified it with the iron solution. I carded it because, again, it got very dangerously close to just turning into a felted mat rather than anything that I can spin with. And I am so happy with that pink color I was able to achieve. That made me, oh my God, I can't even tell you how happy that made me. It's also really fun to use the drum carder. I'm very, very glad that I decided to invest in that. And as a last kind of step, I was looking at the colors I was able to get. I got this light gray, I got a really dark gray with almost black flecks in it with contrasts of pinky purple in both. I got the beautiful dusky pink I was hoping for. I got a golden. And I know that there's a lot of tartans and plants out there that have a ton of colors in them, but I was worried that especially the light gray just didn't have quite the contrast that I was looking for to the natural fiber, to that like cream color of the natural fiber. So what I decided to do, and I will admit, I was wanting to do this anyway. I really wanted to blend some things on my new drum carder, and I layered, like I sandwiched the dark and light gray together. And I think that'll be really interesting to spin and see what that creates in the end. Right now it just kind of looks a lot like the dark gray because that's the sandwich top and bottom, but I think it'll be really cool to see what comes out of that particular bat when I take it to my spinning wheel. Okay, so I have dyed, picked, and carded and turned them into bats, all of the dyed bits of this fleece, but I still have to pick and card the rest of this fleece, which is a lot less than it used to be, but it took me over 2 weeks to do just the dyed portion. I just don't know that I have the hand strength and patience to hand pick the rest of it. I did see if it could maybe go straight from the fleece as it is into the drum carder, but I really don't want to mess up the teeth on my brand new drum carder, and it's just a little too, it's like on the border of being felted. So I do need to pick that open before it goes through that. However, I found the plans to make my own picking box, which is what we will be doing next time, preparing the rest of my fleece to spin and maybe spinning up some samples so you can see what my dyed bits of roving and or bats look like. I'm super excited. This is just a dream come true, and no matter how hard life has been recently, it has been such a light and such a wonderful thing to talk to and talk about with the rest of my family and share with the rest of my family, because it's hard to just fall into the sad things that are going on all the time. It's nice to have something else, unrelated, fun, that everyone can chat about a little bit. So that's been really nice. I hope you enjoyed watching my disaster of a dye experiment that ended up turning out really beautiful. I'm again, super pleased with all of my different hues and shades and colors. It's all from Avocado. It's from one dye stuff. I got 4 different shades that I ended up turning into 3 that I want to use. So I'm really happy with it. I know we're all busy. We all have so much going on. So I always appreciate that you decide to spend your precious time with me, or at least a little bit of it. And I hope to see you next time as we keep moving from sheep to shawl. I'm so excited. I'll see you then. Bye.